Hey, it's Dan Morales. This is Homebuyer Radio, episode number 117. So what I wanted to start doing was doing a series of podcasts where we talk about just the frequently asked questions I get from clients and from those of you who are listeners. I get a ton of questions from folks, and I try to answer all of the email that I get from clients as quickly as possible. And from those of you who are listeners, we try to do the same, try to get you a quick answer to the questions that you do have. Love the fact that we are growing an audience all throughout the U.S. I have clients reaching out to me from all over the U.S., which is, I love it. It's just, to me, it's just fun to be able to know that we're impacting people and helping educate those of you who are looking to buy a house in regards to the mortgage process. Now, if you notice, I kind of focus heavily on just what happens, with the mortgage process or that part of buying a house. The podcast is called Homebuyer Radio. Obviously, there's a lot more to the process of buying a house than just getting a mortgage. How do you find a good realtor? We've interviewed a number of realtors that I work with here locally that are good realtors that, I know will do a really good job for their clients, and kind of pick their brain as part of this home buying process. So we're going to go back to some of that. I'm going to have some of those guys come back in and just start to talk a little bit more about that process as well as the mortgage process. The thing that's kind of interesting is this whole mortgage process is such that there is so many moving parts, and it's always constantly shifting and changing. Last week we talked about the changes to FHA and that FHA scorecard, where clients who were pre-approved may no longer be eligible because of that change in the scorecard. So again, if that's if you're a client that was pre-approved FHA, you're going to want to make sure that you're still pre-approved as part of that process. But we talked about that because that was a really big, significant change. Basically 1 in 4 FHA clients is likely to have some difficulty now being able to be approved because of some of those changes with that scorecard. Now, if you're working with a loan officer who hasn't reached out to you and you were pre-approved FHA, you're going to want to make sure you reach back out to them. But then the question would be, why didn't they reach out to you? They should be on top of that stuff and keeping track of, if you will, the changes to make sure you're good. Well, enough about last week's topic, right? Talking about FHA. This week, what I want to talk about is I get clients who they get ticked off, right? So a lot of times one of the questions I get from folks is, how come you guys ask for so much paperwork when it comes to tracking my cash or my down payment for closing and in my closing cost and so on? Here's the deal. When it comes to getting your mortgage approved, I've got to be able to show where every dollar you put into this transaction came from, okay? So if you need, let's just say, $7,358.25 to be able to close your transaction, I have to document every penny of that, and I've got to be able to show where it came from, okay? So if it magically appears in your bank account, that's fine and dandy that it's there, but I got to be able to show where it came from, because what they're looking for is looking to make sure that you didn't get it from an unapproved, or I should say ineligible source, if you will, okay? What that would be is you took a cash advance on a credit card, or you went and took a personal loan from, a lender of some type, in order to be able to have enough cash to be able to close your transaction. You can't borrow those dollars for your down payment, with the exception of if you are borrowing against an asset that you own free and clear, or if you're borrowing against a 401k account or a retirement account that allows you to borrow against it for the purchase of a house. Those are acceptable sources of a down payment, okay? So you can borrow as long as it's secured, but just keep in mind that if you do borrow, let's say from against a car that you own free and clear, and let's say you're going to take some cash, against that car, and you're going to use that to fund your down payment for your house, you have to be able to qualify for that new auto loan payment in addition to the mortgage payment on the house that you're buying. So that could be an acceptable source of down payment. What wouldn't be an acceptable source of a down payment would be if you went and took, let's say, a cash advance on your MasterCard. If you went and did that, or you took a new personal loan that's unsecured, those are typically ineligible sources of a down payment. Now, the other thing that can be problematic is if you get money from a friend, let's say, okay? Let's just say you have a friend that decides to loan you money to be used towards the purchase of a house. That's typically going to be an ineligible source of down payment because it's a loan and it's an unsecured loan. Now, if you had a gift that came from an acceptable source, Now, an acceptable source can vary depending on the program and some of the rules and guidelines, but for the most part, a gift from a family member, relative, or somebody that you can document a long-standing relationship with is typically going to be allowed to be used as cash that you can use towards down payment and closing cost. Now, keep in mind that has to be documented. Now, depending on the type of loan program that you're doing, the documentation that's required as part of that can vary from program to program. Now, we'll walk you through that process of what's required in your individual circumstances as far as what information you would need to have in order to be able to get, if you will, the gift documented and eligible for use towards the purchase of your house. So a lot of times people wonder, why are you guys so picky about where my money's coming from? That's why. I've got to be able to show that it came from an acceptable source. Now, in some cases, what happens if I can't show that? If I can't document or show where you're getting your money from, it's pretty simple. You don't get a loan. Okay, that's how it works, right? One of the programs that can be a real stickler when it comes to documenting cash to close is an FHA mortgage. In the case of an FHA loan, you generally have to show, I shouldn't say generally, you have to show that if the borrower is getting a gift for the down payment, you have to be able to document that the person that's given them the gift for the down payment actually has the money to be able to give them the gift, if you will. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that is to, get a bank statement from the donor showing that they have the money to give you. Well, if you really want to watch how quickly somebody gets ticked off, a lot of times, people get a gift from, mom, dad, brother, sister, and then you have to get proof that mom, dad, brother, sister had the money to give them as a gift. Well, a lot of times the donors will get upset because it's none of your business where I got my money or how I got it and so on. Well, one of the other things that they're looking to show is they're looking to show that the donor had the money to give you and that it didn't come from, let's say, an interested party in the transaction. So in other words, it didn't come from a builder or it didn't come from a realtor or somebody who has an interested, if you will, an interest in that transaction going together. In the past, there's been elements of fraud where people would go through and you'd have, let's say, a realtor or a builder that would give the money to somebody to turn around and give it as a gift to the homeowner. So it was kind of like a straw person, if you will, given a gift, which, by the way, that's fraudulent, okay? So you can't do that. But in the past, you've had those things happen where you would have, a builder or a realtor or some interested party give a gift that was illegal. And so that's one of the reasons why you got to be able to document where the donor or the fact that the donor did have the money to be able to give to the client as a gift. If you can't document it, you don't get a loan, right? So I've had it before where I've had, parents give me a bank statement and then they black out a bunch of information. That's not acceptable either. I've had it before where the parents are like, I'm not giving you the information. That's real simple. Then you just don't get the loan, okay? That's how it works. I was, this is back probably 2 years ago, I attended an FHA conference with HUD, who insures FHA loans. And I've asked the question, why are you guys so picky about the documentation? And, in cases we have, parents or, a family member who's a donor, and they're really upset when they've got to fork over bank statements or proof that they've got this money for a down payment. And long story short, the gentleman from HUD basically said, too bad. You either fork it over or you don't get the loan. So, I've asked the question, but, the answer to that, why do you guys have to document it all? I've got to be able to show it came from an acceptable, legitimate source and that you didn't borrow it. And if you did borrow it, it has to be, borrowed in a form that's acceptable. But more importantly, I have to be able to count that debt as part of your ability to qualify for the mortgage. And if I can't qualify you with the new debt and the mortgage, now we've got a bigger problem. So, when your lender is asking you, when we ask you, hey, what, where are you, how much do you have for a down payment? Where are you getting your money from and so on? Hey, just be honest, tell us where it's coming from, because then we can start to, lay a roadmap for you on how to document everything and get everything to come together correctly. Okay. Hey, my name is Dan Morales. My NMLS number is 709729. You can find me online at danmorales.com. That's DANMORALEZ.com. You can call me at 616-931-4629. We do lend in all 50 states. Now, granted, we don't have all programs available in all 50 states, but we do have most programs available in most states. states. So we'd love to help you out if you're out looking for a mortgage and you just want somebody who really knows what they're doing, is going to guide you through this process. We would love to be part of that for you. Hey, do me a favor, check out our Instagram TV channel. You can find me at Dan the Mortgage Man on Instagram. There is a video of this podcast there, and you'll start to find some more video there. You can find me on Facebook at Dan the Mortgage Man as well. There's a ton of video there. There's stuff that doesn't make it to the podcast that's on that Facebook channel. It's also on my YouTube channel as well, too. You can find all of that stuff by going to my website at danmorales.com. That's DANMORALEZ.com. Thank you for listening. Make sure you share the podcast to anybody who could learn from the information. We're going to continue to cover just frequently asked questions over the course of the next several weeks here. And if you have a question, hit me up. Send me an email. You can find me at danmorales.com, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. I know today's episode is a little bit longer, just talking about where cash to close is coming from, and the need to have to document that stuff. So I do apologize that it is a longer podcast, but hopefully you learned something as part of the process. And again, just thanks for listening, and make sure to remember to write a review for us on iTunes. You can find me on Homebuyer Radio right on iTunes, and just if you leave a review, that'd be awesome. And again, my MLS number is 709-729, and of course, North Point Bank is an equal housing lender.